Hello, hello. This is the Infinite Wisdom series, the last one of 2023, and I am so thrilled that my guest tonight is the lovely Teresa Joseph, the woman who, yes, she deserves applause. She has written a beautiful book called Everyday Mystic, which I am halfway through, earmarking it all the way. And I'm not going to give a lot of introduction because we're going to have Teresa talk to us in her own words about her journey, and I have to say that Teresa and I we met a number of years ago, just briefly for one afternoon. And then we managed to land in Scotland together, along with Dana here and one other person. And we spent about 10 days tootling across Scotland in an SUV and learning about each other. And one of the things that we started learning was how much we had in common. It was crazy. Our paths have just done this multiple times. And the synchronicities are just too many to even get into. But I, came to realize that she's a kindred spirit. So let me just say, welcome, Teresa. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know it's late for you, but for us, we're just so happy that you said yes. So, my dear, talk to us a little bit. Tell us, just like for some people, they don't know who you are, they don't know what your story is. So, if you could just give us a brief go back in time and bring us forward to writing the book. How about that?
Okay. So I apologize for those of you who know me and have heard this before. But I started life in a very lower middle class family where my parents were always fighting. There was never enough money. My father was an alcoholic, and there was a lot of violence and abuse. And so I thought growing up in that environment that the answer must be to make money and definitely get out of that situation. Like it would be at least help me to get out of the situation. So I pursued a career in finance and ended up at IBM, working for 18 years, and it was great. It did all that. It got me out of that situation and into my own life and living happily in Greenwich, Connecticut with raising my family. And then I started working part-time and got introduced to some women in Old Greenwich. Actually, Donna just got on and she was one of them. Donna and this woman, Margaret Ornitz, who taught us yoga on Donna's third floor in Old Greenwich. And actually, that's another one of our coincidences. Hope, who I met, as she just said, in Scotland and once at my house, it turns out part of her life was spent growing up in Old Greenwich on Kiafram Road, which was where Donna's house was and where I took yoga from Margaret Ornitz. So there's all these crazy overlaps in our lives. But anyway, so Margaret, our yoga teacher, was doing something called Reiki, and we had no idea what that was. But every time she'd put her hands on us in child pose, we could feel all this energy flowing through us. So I thought that might be something to learn more about. So I took a Reiki class while I was still at IBM. And, it really didn't make a lot of sense to me other than in like a fairy godmother kind of way. Cause it was like, oh, this is super cool. Like people can heal. There's this thing called energy. So at lunchtime, I'd line the traders up in the trading room at IBM. And I'd say, close your eyes. I'm going to do this thing on you. It's called Reiki. And they turn around and look at me and go, yeah, and I bet you have a basket on your bicycle. And I was like, I do actually have a basket on my bicycle. So they would humor me and let me do Reiki on them. And of course, all they would do is make fun of me. They would never, in a training room, nobody would ever say anything like that was kind or, like, oh yeah, that really helped me. I found out years later, they actually did have some good experiences. But anyway, that led me to a book called A Course in Miracles. And I started reading that and I was like, wait, what? Like, there is a difference between my ego and my spirit self and who am I? And wait, I thought what I was doing was important. And then I started questioning everything and realizing, wow, wait, no, my whole life is being lived from my ego, this ego place. Like I didn't even know the word other than to be like egotistical. So I started examining that and then really feeling in that environment, that trading room environment, like questioning my ego and whether or not what I was doing was important. I felt like a turtle without a shell. I felt super unprotected. So, and this is going back, to the 80s and the 90s. We weren't talking about compassion and kindness and love. And it was a little tougher environment than even today. And even today on Wall Street, it's still a tough environment. But back then it was particularly difficult. So I stopped working and decided to really dive into this thing called energy. And it would still be another 10 years before I wrote this book. But that was like the point of like just dipping my toe in and kind of finding out what this was all about. And the more I played with it, I took a Reiki class. I would work on people at my house. And even though Reiki and that particular kind of energy work is not about getting messages or seeing vision, it's about channeling universal life force energy. From the moment I started, I would hear messages and see visions for people. And I was afraid to share them because they were so outlandish and so just a lot of times metaphoric, so they didn't make any sense to me. And it was only very slowly talking to people after their sessions, and they'd tell me what was going on. And I'd say, I think I may have gotten a message about that. And I'd give them the message. And they'd say, that's exactly what I needed to hear. That really helps on my journey. So I started to trust, but I'm not a very trusting person. So it's taken me a long time. It took me years. And I wouldn't even now, I trust, but I'm still always questioning. But it was a long time before I really trusted those messages and visions enough to like really share them with people. So I just continued to see people when I could, never charging for the sessions because it just didn't seem right to be charging for this universal life force energy. And then finally, to stop the flow of gifts that people would bring, I just started charging. It was easier than getting earrings and other gifts. And I just felt bad taking the gifts, and then I felt bad charging. So it was just easier to charge. So then I did, and I thought, if this is real and there is this universal life force energy and we're all part of it, let me just set my intention to start doing this. So I basically cleared my calendar and set my intention that this is what I was going to do. And people just started coming. So I had more and more clients until that became really my full-time practice. And then I recorded everything I was seeing and hearing in meditations and in sessions. And I had told my friend Linda about it, and she read my journals and was convinced that there needed to be a book written. So I am not, I've talked to so many people that have told me, I think I need to write a book. I have a book in me. I have never felt like I had a book in me. I'm not that person. I'm also like, I don't consider myself like I read, but language isn't my strongest skill set. So the thought of writing a book terrified me. But Linda was so convinced that she took all of my journals and typed them up and then organized them and categorized them into subject headings, or like the way she approached her PhD. I don't have a PhD, and there's a good reason for it. But she, she's good at that. That's what she does. And she organized it, and she said, here, this is how this is how the book should lay out. And then she was very good about never writing it. Like I did the writing, but she kind of did the content editing, I guess. So that's how the book came to be. It was never meant to be. It was never a thing. It was never on my radar.
Well, I think that there are a few things that happened along the way that made you become less of a doubter, when you say, like what happened when you sold your house, and having to move, and all of them. These are things that are also very much in my storyline. And the other thing that we shared was
Right.
this directive from spirit to move, and even in a way that didn't make any sense at all, and we were doing just fine where we were. Thank you very much. But
Yeah.
I love your story about the 5 win. So let's be clear about who you've been receiving messages from as well.
So from the minute I started doing Reiki, I think it was probably the very first time, Jesus would show up and give me messages. And to be clear about that, he never shows up as a religious figure. He shows up as an enlightened master, alongside many others. But primarily, he's my messenger, as well as Mother Mary. Um, and what Hope is talking about is, he showed up in November of 2011 saying, sell your house, I'll find you something. And I loved Old Greenwich. I loved our neighborhood. Like, kids were happy. We were doing great there. And I was really reluctant to entertain the idea of selling my house. I mean, that was just devastating to me. And I remember calling Donna, and she was just thinking like, oh, that's a great idea. Like I told her, I was thinking, looking up in Litchfield, we're looking at these farms, and Donna's like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, oh my God, no, it's not. It's a terrible idea. We were moving away from the water. We were moving away from everything we knew. I learned a lot about attachment, what I was attached to, like the Whole Foods in Greenwich, and conveniences that were there always at our fingertips. But he wasn't asking me. I mean, he really was he said, move. And when I didn't do it, because I came up, I looked with my husband at properties. He wasn't having it. He was so angry about the thought of moving out of Greenwich. And I hadn't even told him that Jesus told me to move. I was just convinced him to look at real estate. So he's Jewish, and I'm getting a message from Jesus telling me to move. So I thought, best I don't tell him where this is coming from. So the market had turned up here, and he's in real estate. So I was like, let's go look. I think there's some good deals up in Litchfield. And so he came just as kind of like, hey, yeah, let's, always looking for a deal. Let's see what's going on. And when I tried to convince him that we should buy something, he wasn't having it. So I figured, I'm done. Jesus asked me to move. I tried. My husband's not on board. I'm done. I don't even want to move. So I'm good. And then I sat down to dinner at our house in Old Greenwich after this, and everybody was out of the house. And I sat down at my kitchen table having leftovers. And I thought, I never say grace. I'm going to just put my hands together and say grace. So I went to put my hands together, and Jesus appeared standing right next to me and said, like almost in an angry voice, like, I told you to move. And I just burst into tears because it was so overwhelming and so real. And that's like, tears are one of my like red flags now. Looking back, I could see like it's really like I see it as our heart trying to speak to us, and it's so enormous, and it's trying to get this through this little skinny throat of ours and then up to our brain, and there's just not enough room in our brain to conceive of what our heart knows.
Mm.
And it's just so big. And I think when I have these experiences where Jesus comes like that, the tears come because like my heart knows it's true, but my brain can't process it. So I said to him in conversation, because I do believe this, if these beings show up, it can be a conversation. So I just said, I need my husband on board. And he said, it is done. And I was like, huh, it's that easy? I was like, okay, I need this much money for my house. And he goes, it is done. And I'm like, oh, let me ask for more. So anyway, that's kind of how our conversation went. And sure enough, that's what we did. We put the house on the market. And
What about the 5 houses?
so here's what that actually happened before, when I wasn't, I still wasn't moving very fast on listing the house. So I had a dream, and they showed me 5 houses on our street going on the market at the same time. So for those of you that know Old Greenwich, Keophram is one of these streets, and Ledge Road was another, where the houses a lot of times didn't make it to market because somebody would hear that a house was going up for sale and buy it before it even hit the market. Or if it did hit the market, it would go very quickly. So to have 5 houses on our street come up for sale at the same time was unheard of in the 21 years we were there. So the dream made no sense, but I thought, I think this dream is a prophecy, and I shouldn't say that. At the time, I just thought, that's weird. I should pay attention to this dream. And so I did. We rushed, we put the house on the market, we sold it very quickly. And then 5 houses came on the market at the same time on our street. So there's no way we would have gotten the price we did for a house had we waited and those 5 houses came on the market. So, I think that's just another way for spirit to talk to us, right? It's through our dreams, it's through synchronicities, but we oftentimes don't pay attention to them. And so sometimes our dream is just a warning, sometimes it's a prophecy. But I think we have to learn to pay a lot more attention to these things as a communication, because sometimes that's what they are.
I couldn't agree with you more. And this is one thing I really love about your book, is that it draws it really helps a person to, and I'm imagining a person who doesn't hear or talk to Jesus like you and I do, but they're on the cusp, which everybody is on the cusp of it. It's remarkably accessible once we sort of get over ourselves. But you give some great roads in to try to get to that point where you can have these conversations and become sensitized to the different ways that the information is coming in, whether it be dreams, whether it be the animal worlds, comes all kinds of insects even, come at particular
Right,
times. And I don't know about you, but people have told me over the years, well, there was this one time and this butterfly came or this dragonfly came or and of course we can all go, well, yeah, yeah, yeah. But that person had a sense that that was a meaningful, that bird, the moment that that bird was there staring at them on the other side of the window, whatever it is, there's something about it that your sixth sense goes, wait a minute, this is extraordinary.
right.
This is something else. So I just love in the book so far, I'm only halfway through, but how you're steering people towards that kind of sensitivity.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this book was published in 2015, so it's so long. It seems so long ago now, but there was a different sensibility when I first started this work, which was back in 1998. Now I think it's so much more common to have some of that sensibility, to really think that, well, no, there are signs and we do need to pay attention to dreams, and we do need to pay attention to animals that cross our paths. We still, I think, though, at least I can speak of myself, I still need to really be aware of that small voice. I'll use this. There was an example that I use in the book where we were walking to the beach with our kids and another couple that we were friends with, and my son had just learned to ride his bike. And I was talking to my girlfriend. My son was probably 10 feet or 15 feet ahead of me on his bicycle. And my girlfriend was mid-sentence, and I just broke into a run. And by the time I reached my son's back wheel, he fell into my arms. And my girlfriend said, "How did you know that he was going to fall?" I said, "I didn't. I just felt in my body. I didn't even hear the words. I just felt run." And so it was the rudest thing I could have done to my friend. But this is the thing, okay? When these senses come within our body, and whether it's us and our just spidey senses or spirit talking to us, we have to pay attention. But a lot of times we push them down because, oh, my girlfriend's talking to me right now, I can't run. But yeah, you can, because if you're getting the feeling, and feelings are the language of the universe, you have to honor that feeling over all of the societal norms that we have layered upon us. So I think feelings have to trump. And even saying that, there has to be a caveat, because there are people in the world who act from emotions that are not the kind of feelings that I'm talking about. That doesn't mean every emotion. Oh, I'm angry. Oh, I'm this, I'm that. So, you act from that. This is a deep feeling within you. And a lot of times when those feelings come, they typically make no sense. There's no logic. I think Carolyn Mace likes to say that. It's if you think God's going to be logical, it's not going to happen. Just like asking you to move from your house. It's ridiculous. There was no rational reason for me to move. Okay, but here's a crazy thing. At the end of the book, which you haven't read this yet, but one of the struggles I had, and it was so hard for me up here in those first years. Thank God I met Cheryl. Cheryl was my saving grace here. And I, just be longing for being back in Old Greenwich. And I wrote in the book, I totally get it if I had to move because my husband's job demanded it, that he had to, his business moved, then we move. That makes sense to me. It's logical. Moving because Jesus wakes you up in the middle of the night and says, sell your house, makes no sense. And maybe that's why I'm struggling. So I said in the book, I'd love to get a call that just said, hey, I need to move you to an island in the Caribbean. So here's what happened. This is post the publication of that book. I was with a friend down in Florida, and I get a phone call from my husband saying we have to move to Puerto Rico. I was like, oh my God, I wrote that in the book, but I didn't really mean for it to happen. And then we moved to Puerto Rico, and I had a terrible time adjusting to that all over again. But here it was. This was, my husband's job. He moved himself, but it was like, a requirement, not a requirement. He decided that he would move to Puerto Rico for his job. And here I was going to a Caribbean island, which I always longed for, being in the warm weather. I got the call, just like I said in my book, would make total sense. It was for a job. And I got down there and I'm like, this sucks. Like, I want to be back at the farm. So it was like I was only here for 3 years and we moved again. And it took me all those 3 years to kind of get settled in here, and finally it stopped fighting what was, which is I was here.
Mhm.
Which
I love that
brings us
story.
to, yeah.
I love that story because you're listening, you're paying attention, and then when you think what you want is the greener grassy hill, you get it, and it's not so green and grassy.
Yeah, and
Uh,
this is why I go to, I think this is part of why I surrendered to following God's will, because he once said to me, do you really think the decisions you make would be better than the ones, or do you really think the decisions I make for you would be worse than the ones you made for yourself? And I just started laughing. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, my life is not like some stellar example of like how to make good decisions. So when I weigh it like that, I think, all right, what do I have to lose?
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh. I love it. I just think, you know, I was so impressed by you, and knowing how hard it was for me to follow the direction of my guidance, which didn't make any sense. Um, and hearing what you went through with yours, I just so appreciate it, that you just stuck with it, and now you're in such a beautiful place, and now you understand why you're there. I think, right?
I don't know. I mean, there are moments when I understand why I'm here. I've looking back, I could see definite reasons. I mean, for instance, my son met his girlfriend, who's this is like a very serious, not just like a passing girlfriend, because we were here, because she was close by this area. So when he was on the dating websites, it was somebody, who was in like 30 miles from here. That wouldn't have happened. My mom at the end of her life decided to leave my father and came live with me here. She wouldn't have done that if I was still down in Greenwich, because it was just too far.
Mhm.
This was much more doable for her. So, there are a lot of things, just miracles that have happened up on the farm, like healings and crazy, crazy stuff. And then, we've been looking actually, this is an aside, but also a postscript to the story. We've been looking for years to have somebody farm the land. And we've had a couple of farmers over the years, but they don't, they'll last for like 2 years or so, and then they move on. And so I'd pretty much given up. I was like, I'm not looking for farmers anymore. So I got a call um, a couple of weeks ago from a farmer who heard about our property. I don't even know how. And I met with them and I was like, this is like the perfect couple to farm our property. And so what are their names? Genesis and Jacob. Oh my God. I think these are the two. These are the ones who are supposed to farm the land.
Oh my God.
And so they're going to start in January.
Wow.
Really cool stuff. They're taking one of my barns and growing mushrooms inside the barns.
Fantastic.
Another barn, they're doing like microgreens all winter long. And then the fields are going to be farmed in this like no-till, like it's totally sustainable. There's no heavy equipment. Everything is like in sync with nature. They're going to put
Wow.
trees on the property, like the whole thing.
Wow.
Of course, the name is Genesis. So,
It's very biblical up there.
it's very biblical. Yeah.
Well, now let's I have some other things about the book, but let's go from the book from 2015 forward and tell us about how that has been.
You mean like since publishing the book?
Yeah, and what has your how has your world changed? How has what has come in? Anything new since then? I'm
Yeah.
sure there's been a
So
lot.
yeah, since then, we moved here in 2012. The book came out in 2015. And we moved to Puerto Rico. That was
Ah,
that was the big that was the big transition. Um, well, here's another funny story about Puerto Rico too. Again, trying to adjust and can't find like the most basic services. I needed somebody to color my hair. So I was like, all right, Jesus, I need somebody to just color my hair. Literally the next day I'm in the dog park and I meet this guy. And I'm like, he was a Texan actually living down in Puerto Rico. And I don't speak Spanish, so I could talk to this guy. I was like, yeah, I'm like, I can't find anybody to color my hair down here. And I'm like, I'm afraid because, with the language barrier, I don't want him to do the wrong color. He's like, oh my God, my partner is a colorist. I was like, great. Let me have his name. So he takes my phone and types it in. His partner's name is Jesus.
oh,
I'm like, the day after I tell Jesus I need somebody to color my hair, he sends me Jesus. And Jesus and I are still good friends. I love this guy.
oh God.
Yeah.
I love your stories, and I think everybody would love to hear more of them because, again, you talked about your doubting mind, and I had my own doubting mind for a while too. And so I find that the more evidence there is, the more experiences that somebody else has had, um, it just helps us all to get a little closer to the edge and leap into the leap of faith. So, do you want to tell some more of your beautiful synchronicity stories?
Let's see which ones come to mind. Um, hmm.
You had a couple
Well,
in here.
I'm thinking of one that actually is not in the book, but it was before we moved here. We ended up moving just like across the street on Ledge Road for where we were in Old Greenwich from one house to another. And we weren't looking to move at that time. But when I walked into this house, all I could see was this like divine white light coming through the center of it.
Mhm.
And so my husband was out of town and I convinced him we had to buy this house. And when he came back into town and saw it, it was February, and he was like tromping through the house and getting angrier and angrier. This is a common theme. He's angry with me, and I'm like following the light, and he's angry. He's tromping through the house. And by the time he got to the third floor, like steam was coming out of his ears. He goes, Teresa, you told me this was in move-in condition. He goes, this is nowhere near move-in condition. The next day he had like contractors in giving him estimates. He's like, absolutely not. We're not buying the house. I was like, well, I said, you gave your word. And he goes, we don't have a contract. I was like, you gave your word. That's your third chakra. You can't go back on that. So we did end up buying the house. And he was angry at me for like 9 months, but or maybe it was 9 years. Can't remember. I mean, it was like he was never really happy there. So the problem was that once I went in and saw the light, like there was just no convincing me. Like I think I could have lived in it the way it was, because that's all I saw was just this divine light. And then the crazy thing was, as if that's not crazy, but when we were moving from that house to come up to Litchfield, to the farm, I invited a shaman in, Lucy Walker, who a couple of you on here on the call know, because I wanted to make sure we weren't leaving any soul fragments behind when we left that house. And so she went through the process with my family and made sure none of us were leaving anything behind. And then she told me she never knew the story I just told you about the white light coming through the center of the house. And she told me after her ceremony was over that she'd closed off the energy of the house. She said there was an enormous white beam of divine light coming through the whole center of the house, and that she closed that for us.
Wow.
Like, you always take that light with you. And so, I always thought it was there. I think it was, before we arrived. But it's like for the new family now to open up their own kind of portal and their own divine light in that house.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful story.
but it was really very cool. Yeah. So what other stories?
Well, tell us a little bit about your practice now. Are you still doing Reiki?
I am, but I call it channeling grace because, again, many years ago in the course of doing a Reiki session, Mother Mary showed up and clear as day said, you're channeling grace. So from that moment on, I just call it what she told me to call it, because really it's recognizing the role of the divine, the role of God. It's God's grace that's healing. It's God's grace that's doing anything through me. There's nothing, absolutely nothing. I tell people, especially new clients, I said, I can't do anything for you, but the only thing I can do is get out of the way so that God could come through and do whatever is for your highest good. And so the skill set I have is getting out of the way. And that's, we, again, coming from any of us, like whatever our backgrounds are, we're on this journey, right? So we're born in without really an ego. We develop this ego, and then we learn, oh, wait, we shouldn't be running our lives from that. So then it's a dismantling and a peeling away of all these layers that we think make us who we are. And I think one of the things you learn in doing this kind of work is, healing work with the divine, is how those layers are really meaningless. They are not the core of who we are. They're not the core of the person next to us. And then the work is to see through those, to peel our own layers away, but without, like I started by saying, when I was at IBM and peeling away the layers of the ego, I felt very vulnerable because I felt that's all I were those layers. But I think the longer you're on this journey, you realize that as you're peeling the layers away, what's underneath is not vulnerable. It's so much stronger than those layers would ever have you believe you are.
Mm,
Because in the earlier years, I would have believed if I peel the layers away, there's nothing. But then you learn on the journey that when you peel the layers away, there's everything,
mm,
but there's
mm.
nothing to show for it. You know, there's no titles, there's no accolades. Like when you're nothing with a capital N almost.
Mhm,
It's like
mhm,
you're nothing and everything at the same time. You're
mhm,
just nothing that you've made yourself to be.
mhm.
Um,
Exactly. Beautifully said.
yeah.
Beautifully said. Um, I love that. And I'm with you on that. Tell us a little bit. We've heard that you talked to Mother Mary and you talked to Yeshua, but I know you talked to others. Would you like
Mhm.
to share a little bit about who else you talked to?
So with whomever I talk to, it's not that I go in looking for these entities, they will show up. For instance, one night, again, these entities show up a lot of times in meditation. Sometimes they'll just pop in, but a lot of times in meditation. So my message is always that we can all do this. It's just a matter of quieting our mind long enough for us to just become aware of what's around us. So Saint Rita showed up one night, and she's somebody that I didn't even know there was a Saint Rita, but she appeared and then she just came with this knowing, like it comes into my head, it's Saint Rita. So then the next day I have to look up Saint Rita. Is there a Saint Rita? Sure enough, there is. Um, or it could be a message from Kuan Yin or Kali, or angels. I had a vision of these angels, and I guess I was doubting them. And in the vision, they showed me like this little, like a handbag or something, and I turned the handbag over, and angels just came out everywhere, and they were circles around upon circles upon circles upon circles of angels, and they're like, yes, Teresa, we're here. We've always been here. We'll continue to be here. You could stop questioning our presence. um, but they kind of have a sense of humor on the other side too. You know,
Very much so.
I'm glad you find that too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had we did my monthly channeling was last night, and Merlin usually opens things up and is the first speaker, and then we see who else comes in. And he's usually very dry, and he can be very funny. And the way he said goodbye to everybody last night, because he sounded a little on edge, shall we say? So he ended up saying, "I know I sound like an old cranky man, but I really do love you all." But just this is great. Oh, just adorable.
Yeah, that's a good.
But yeah, and Yeshua can be funny, very funny. So, but you also don't you speak with Saint Teresa of Lisieux?
Yeah, Saint Teresa of Lisieux and Saint Teresa of Avila.
Mm-hmm.
Saint Teresa is the one who told me to paint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, I don't paint. I don't know how to paint. And a week after she gave me that message, I got in the mail. We were still in Old Greenwich. I got in the mail a flyer for a class called Painting from Within. And so I thought, this must be the class she wants me to take. So, again, I don't know when that happens. Is that her? I don't know. But she just told me to paint. And then I've never gotten a flyer for a class called Painting from Within. So I just keep following the breadcrumb trail that it's being left. And actually, that's a funny story because I went to the class, and people were setting up canvases that they were already working on. It's like they could have presented them at art shows, and I didn't know brushes. I don't know how to, what kind of paints or how to clean my brushes, or I didn't know where to start. So the instructor helped me with that. And then I think like 4 or 5 classes in, I kept painting the same thing, because what I was doing is sitting down in meditation with Saint Therese. And I'd say, okay, you told me you wanted me to paint. Now, what do you want me to paint? And so she would show me the vision and I'd start painting. She'd say, no, the brush strokes have to go this way. So she told me how to do the brush strokes. And each time we were given an assignment in this class, I would sit with Saint Therese and she would show me again what to paint, tell me how to paint it. And I'd bring it into class. And finally, this instructor said, in the front of all the other students, very loudly, she said, Teresa, it is too early in your career to develop a signature style. And I had a flashback to like first grade in Catholic school, where they tore my headband off my head because like it didn't match my uniform or something. And they're like always like yelling at us. And I was like, for a moment, I froze and I thought, I'm not going to let her do this to me. I am not going to let her shut me down. So I said to her, for everybody to hear, I paint what Saint Teresa of Lisieux shows me to paint. And if this is all she ever shows me, this is all I'll ever paint. And
Good
when
for
the class ended,
you.
I took my brushes and I never went back, because I thought, no, like this is historically, if somebody who's the expert says you're not supposed to do this, then I'd be like, oh yeah, of course I can't paint. What was I thinking? So yeah,
Good
that's
for you. That took guts.
well, maybe just came because it was so ridiculous. I mean, what she was telling me was ridiculous, but also it was so ridiculous that I was like being guided by Saint Therese. And I'm like, you know what? I'm living my life like this now. So I kind of just decided at that moment to own it.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was all about. Where is that painting?
Though that painting, the first one I ever did in that class, I have, but all the other paintings have sold.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but that's
Wow.
kind of the crazy. And look, I know I'm not an artist, but there is something when they on the other side or whatever tell you to do something, again, it is the most illogical, irrational thing, but it yields results that are equally irrational, because there
Yeah.
are talented artists that they paint, they're really good stuff. And I end up with commissions, which makes no sense. So,
Oh,
and
I
I
love it.
realize that.
Are you still painting?
Yes, I just finished all my commissions and I was like, I wonder if I'll ever be asked to paint anything again, because I don't know how they're going to come in. And then again, within weeks, I got one commission, then another, and now I have 5.
Oh my
Again, I have
goodness.
like this list that I have to get to. Um, so it makes no sense.
Well, I think we need to stop saying that. Can we stop saying that? That
Okay.
it makes no sense? And maybe the word crazy and ridiculous, because that's true on a 3D level, but that's not the world you're living in. And the world you're living in, it makes perfect sense. And this whole flowering of artistry. I mean, what a incredible creative gift, and I just love that you're working hand in hand with her, and so to speak, you are her hands in a way, right?
Yeah, I guess you can look at it like that. I mean, what she does when she shows me, because what I do now is I meditate on the person who's requesting the painting. And so what Saint Therese does is she encodes it with sacred energy specifically for that person. So that's the one difference between when I started, it was just, she would just show me what to paint.
I see.
And now I meditate on the person with Saint Therese. So she's giving that person through the artwork something they need to sustain themselves. Either it's a
Well,
reminder of who they are, it's something they need for healing. It's probably multiple things and things I don't even understand.
mhm. I wouldn't be surprised if you got a few more commissions after this call tonight because a
Well,
lot of people would, well, first of all, I wanna make sure we leave time for people to ask questions. But, can you work with people at a distance?
yes, absolutely. And my clients are all over. And most of them I see on Zoom because again, God is doing it. Doesn't matter where I am or where they are. Um, yeah, God will find them.
So how can people reach you?
So they could write to me at Teresa@teresajoseph.com. Or go to my website, which is teresajoseph.com.
Okay, I'm just putting that in the chat. And, everybody, I mean, it's also linked in my newsletter for those of you who get it. Um, those of you who already know Teresa know how to reach her, but for the folks who don't know, now you have your way. And, okay, so let's just see if we have some questions tonight. Anybody care to ask the lovely Teresa, the very wonderful Teresa, a question? Anybody? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, if you think of one, let me know. And in the meantime, Teresa, what, where do you see things going from here for yourself or do you ever peer around the corner?
It's funny. I had a friend who always used to tell me her 5-year plan. And I was like, I don't have a 5-day plan, honestly, because my plan is to continue to surrender to divine will. So wherever that leads me. The hard part is the surrender. I say that and I try to live it, but then when it happens, sometimes it's difficult.
Let's talk about surrender because, when I think you and I probably use the word in the same way, but people can get very triggered by that word. They think it means giving up.
hmm,
And in a way it is, but it's not defeat. It's more giving over, right? When you say,
right. When I say surrender, it's not a passive activity at all. It's actually a very active engagement with kind of a higher power.
mhm,
And so what I want to do is to really acknowledge that I don't know everything and that there may be a path that leads to my highest good that I can't even conceive of, like moving from Greenwich to Litchfield. I mean, now it feels very right, but it's not a path I would have chosen.
mhm,
And so I see surrender as something that you do from a place of strength and real love of the divine.
mhm, mhm. I think that's beautifully said. Beautifully said. And it's one of the most, I mean, and it's interesting you talk about sort of you need to keep surrendering. You need to have a steady diet of surrendering. But after a while it becomes so um delicious in a way, that the the giving over, the hookup that has to how it happens, that feels so good. That it's not a painful act at all.
No, but at least for me, it takes like it takes awareness, it takes thoughtfulness. And so it is a way, it becomes a way of life. But sometimes when I'm surrendering, I'm kicking up my heels and yahooing, and other times I'm like, really? Like, that's what you want me to do? And then there's the other piece of it is, so that's one aspect, a big aspect of surrender for me. And then the other is just surrendering to what is at the moment. So, for instance, if I was able to surrender what is when I was asked to move up here, there wouldn't have been any turmoil within inside of me. You know, there would have been just inner peace because I would have accepted that this is what I was doing. So there's also that aspect. There's also a surrendering to the present moment. And I even think that, you know, it's a practice. It's when the present moment is good, it's easy to surrender to. When the present moment is hard, you know, we're going through difficult times. For me, it's harder to surrender to that. You know, we're questioning, I question and yeah.
Well, yeah,
So,
that's beautifully said. And I think, you know, it's a great habit to get into, at any level of it. It's a great habit to get into. You reap quite a few rewards, as your life has been a beautiful demonstration of and I know that you get up very early, pretty much every morning, if not every morning, and have your communing time. And this is why this is late for Teresa. She's usually in bed by now, but you're up like at 4 o'clock, right? Having your
yeah, pretty much.
conversations.
Yeah, pretty much every morning. There's something about that hour in,
Yeah.
well, anyway, being up before the rest of the world is up. There's a
Mhm.
quietness to the world at that hour, you know, that once everybody gets going, you could just feel it, you know, you feel the energy of everybody moving, and the light is different. And yeah, there's a real peacefulness. I just think it's easier to connect. That's not why I do it. It just happens that that's my schedule. So yeah.
Well, I understand it, and I find that there are times, even just this morning, where I wake up super early like that, just naturally, and
Mhm.
I always think, oh, I am not as disciplined as you. I do not always go and sit and do my meditation, and I know I should. I'm shoulding myself,
Yeah.
but I often think that they're wanting to say something to me, because there is an exquisiteness about those early morning hours. I agree with you. I love it when I wake up like that. I'm like, oh,
It
oh.
feels really good. But that's another thing, like, you know, to be on the schedule that I'm on, I've been on this for a very long time. It's again very out of step with society. It's a
Mhm,
very hard thing to do when you're going to bed at 8 o'clock at night, you know, or 8:30. That'll be a late night for me.
mhm,
But you know, my husband at the time, he doesn't want to go to bed at 8 o'clock. You know, if we're going out with people, it's like a whole big thing. I have to like prepare myself. I have to be up late tonight. Um, so it's just hard. I mean, I guess everybody has to find the right balance for them.
mhm, mhm,
I just feel personally, I feel better with that kind of a 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. I feel great like that.
mhm. Well, it's much more in keeping with how we are supposed to sleep. We're supposed to sleep when the sun goes down.
Exactly.
And wake up that's the rhythm of the world, really. So you're right in sync.
Right.
I don't want to keep people too long. We've gone for an hour.
Yeah.
Uh, Before we go, I just want to ask you first of all, Wendy had a question, but Wendy, that question was answered in the early part of the call. So I'm going to ask you to watch the replay, please. But Teresa, what would you like to leave us with tonight? Is there anything else you'd like to say, or any tidbits?
I think my only message, and the people who know me have heard this so many times, is the message Jesus delivered to me when he not appeared to me, but actually pulled me across the veil that separates our world from his and pulled me into his dimension, whatever that is. But it is noticeably a different dimension. And he said about the meaning of life, he said, it's so simple. It's all about love. That's my only message. It's the only message I have delivered to clients over 20 years. They get that message in a billion different ways. It always comes down to love. And it's love without conditions. It's not love this person, don't love that person. It's love, unconditional love. That's why there's 8 billion people on the planet. It's like we are meant to learn to love regardless of whatever you see on the outside.
Mhm.
So the meaning of life is simple. It's all about love. That's it.
Beautifully, beautifully said. Oh, I love you. I'll tell you that. I love the fact that we now are friends, and
Yeah, me too. It's great.
and as soon as my little bookie I get my second shipment, I'm sending you one. So stand by for that.
And yeah, for those of you who don't know, Hope just published a book called The Infinity Wave. And that's like it's a whole other story.
Yeah,
But
we don't need to go there tonight,
another,
but thank
yeah,
you.
but yeah, it's a great book.
This is your night, babe. So
Well, thank
I
you, Hope. I appreciate it. And thank you all for showing up because, there's still enough ego left that if nobody signed on, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm a failure. So nice to see all the smiling faces.
it's great to see some of your friends and to know how supported you are. And I'm sure, way beyond even those who are here tonight.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, if you sign up for Teresa's on her website, you get a daily message from Everyday Mystic, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And as she and I were talking before we started, and she said, because I was saying, this is just a like a fantastic book. You could almost open it anywhere. And she said that's what people do. They leave it by their bedside and they just open it wherever. And there's always something that's meaningful. There are lots of quotes from the channeled messages that Teresa has had over the years. Also, her story, a little with more detail, is interwoven amongst the whole thing. And your humility, your self-deprecating humor, which some people have seen tonight, I think, it makes it a delightful read and timeless, really. I mean, you could have written this yesterday, and I would say, oh yeah, you're right on the money. So, um, go and get it. If you don't have it already, go and get it. That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks, Hope. And
You're
also
welcome.
those daily messages, there is a second book of just daily messages. So if you want, that's on Amazon too. You can find them just by typing in my name. Well, thank
Fantastic.
you, Hope. That was great. Thank you, everybody,
Yeah,
for
thank
coming.
you.
Really
And
fun.
happy solstice, everybody. We're 2 days away, and happy holidays. And really appreciate you taking your time with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, Hope. I'm